Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys. Part 8. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, A Midsummer Ramble Through the Dolomites, by Amelia B. Edwards. Part 8. Chapter 4. At Cortina, Part 2. To ascend the Campanile and get the near view over the village was obviously one of the first duties of a visitor. So, finding the door open and the old bell-ringer inside, we mounted laboriously to the top, nearly 100 feet higher than the leaning tower of Pisa. Standing here upon the outer gallery above the level of the great bells, we had the village and valley at our feet. The panorama, though it included little which we had not seen already, was fine all around, and served to impress the main landmarks upon our memory. The Ampezzo Thal opened away to north and south, and the twin passes of the Tre Croce and the Tre Sassi intersected it to east and west. When we had fixed in our minds the fact that Landro and Brunec lay out to the north, and Perarolo to the south, that Auronzo was to be found somewhere on the other side of the Tre Croce, and that to arrive at Caprile it was necessary to go over the Tre Sassi, we had gained something in the way of definite topography. The Marmolata and Civita, as we knew by our maps, were on the side of Caprile, and the Marmarole on the side of Auronzo. The Pelmo, left behind yesterday, was peeping even now above the ridge of the Rochetta, in a group of fantastic rocks, so like the towers and bastions of a ruined castle that we took them at first sight for the remains of some medieval stronghold, marked the summit of the Tre Sassi to the west. "But what mountain is that, far away to the south?" we asked, pointing in the direction of Perarolo. "Which mountain, Signora?" "That one yonder, like a cathedral front with two towers." The old bell-ringer shaded his eyes with one trembling hand and peered down the valley. He said, "it is some mountain on the Italian side. E una montagna della parte d'Italia." "But what is it called?" He repeated, with a puzzled look. "Chi lo sa? I don't know that I ever noticed it before." Now it was a very singular mountain, one of the most singular and the most striking that we saw throughout the tour. It was exactly like the front of Notre Dame, with one slender aiguille, like a flagstaff, shooting up from the top of one of its battlemented towers. It was conspicuous from most points on the left bank of the Boita, but the best view, as I soon after discovered, was from the rising ground behind Cortina, going up through the fields in the direction of the Bergantina torrent. From thence I made the accompanying sketch, and to this spot we returned again and again, fascinated as much perhaps by the mystery in which it was enveloped, as by the majestic outline of this unknown mountain, to which, for want of a better name, we give the name of Notre Dame. For the old bell-ringer was not alone in his ignorance. Ask whom we would, we invariably received the same vague reply. It was a mountain della parte Italia. They knew no more, and some, like our friend of the Campanile, had evidently not noticed it before. What with the great heat of the afternoon, which made uphill work difficult and rapid walking impossible, what with the wonderful wild flowers that enticed us continually from the path, what with chatting to peasants by the way, stopping to study the landscape, sketching, and so forth, we never reached the chalet of the Belvedere after all. We came very near it, however, and gained a magnificent view over the valley, the Cristallo group, and the range of the Croda Malcora. Here also, from a grassy knoll near the cross below the Crespa, the writer devoted a long hour to making a careful drawing of the Antelao, which is here seen to its greatest advantage. From no other point, indeed, is it possible, so far as I am aware, to get so good a view of the great snow slope at the back of the summit, in combination with the splintered buttresses that strike down towards Borco and Voda in the front. The first ascent of the highest peak of this mountain was achieved by that famous climber, Dr. Grohmann, in 1863, and the second in 1864 by Lord Francis Douglas of hapless memory, accompanied by Mr. F. L. Latham and by two guides named Matteo Ossi and Santo Siorpaes. The latter, a brave, hardy, faithful fellow, who travelled with us later in the autumn among the Italian Alps and through the Zermatt district, assured me that Lord Francis, though so young, was an excellent mountaineer, and described him as buono, bello e biondino, good, handsome, and fair. The ascent is taken from a pass called the Forcello Piccolo, which divides the mass of the Marmarole from that of the Antelao, and is most quickly reached from San Vito. Owing to the long snow slope before mentioned, this mountain, up to a certain point, is considered to be easier than any other great Dolomite except the Marmolata, but the last pull up the actual pinnacle, which rises with formidable steepness to a height of some 300 feet, and curves over like a horn, is said to be difficult. It was supposed to be inaccessible till Dr. Groman's time, when the fortunate discovery of a certain cleft by one of his Cortina guides opened the way to the German cragsmen and to all who should come after him. A good climber can ascend from and return to San Vito in 11 hours, exclusive of halts. The country folk were all coming up to their homes on the pasturages of Monte Averau, as we went down again in the cool of the early evening, some with empty milk pails, having sold their milk in Cortina, others carrying home their store of bread and flour just purchased. One or two begged somewhat abjectly for a soldo por l'amor de Dio, but for the most part they passed with a brisk step, a pleasant smile, and a cheerful Guten Abend or Buona Sera. A civil, kindly people on the whole, as we soon came to know right well. A people ready with good wishes and little friendly salutations which, even if they have come to be spoken as mere matters of course, yet help to keep warm the spirit of goodwill. If they pass through the room where you are at meals, they will wish you good appetite. If you are going out, a pleasant walk. If you are on your way to bed, sound sleep and happy dreams. You yawn, and they wish you felicita. You sneeze, and they say salute. That evening, as we were sitting down to a meal which was dinner, or supper, or both, we were startled by a furious discord of drums and brass instruments in the street below. It was the company of strolling acrobats who had just arrived and were parading through the village, followed by all the boys and idlers in the place. A drummer on stilts, a buffoon in high collars and a tall hat, like Paul Pry, some half-dozen athletic fellows in the traditional fillets and fleshings, and about as many hideous-looking, muscular women tramping the dusty road in white shoes and the briefest conceivable skirts. The theatre, it seemed, was open tomorrow, although the Sagro would not be held until Sunday. It was on the morning of the third day after we had settled down at Cortina that the storm which had so long been gathering burst at last. Supported by the consciousness of his own merit, the courier had borne with us till he could bear with us no longer. Now, however, the near prospect of being dragged over passes and up mountains, of having to ride on a mule for days in succession, and of living for many weeks to come in Tyrolean albergos several degrees less comfortable than the Aquila Nera, was too much for the great man's philosophy. He understood, he said, that there were no carriage roads to most of the places laid down in our maps, and no suitable accommodation, such as he was accustomed to when travelling with parties who placed confidence in his opinion. He therefore begged leave to tender his resignation and his accounts. Our vagabond tastes, in short, were too much for him, and he deserted us, if that could be called desertion, which must in all likelihood have taken the form of dismissal ere long, just at the time when the protection of a trustworthy and respectable man had become an indispensable condition of our journey. It is needless to add that the fortnight's notice which he offered was summarily rejected, and that he was then and there paid off and done with. As for L., by whom he had been retained for months before we joined forces in Naples, she transacted the whole affair with an amount of withering sang-froid that speedily reduced the offender to a condition of abject humility. He made an effort by and by to assert his indifference by playing at bowls in front of the albergo, but went away in the afternoon outside the Longarone Schnellwagen, quite crestfallen. And now what was to be done? Could we possibly go on with only guides and no courier? Or must the tour through the wild heart of the country be given up, just as we had come within sight of our promised land? These were questions that must be solved before we could venture one day's journey beyond the post roads of Cortina. As a matter of choice, we indefinitely preferred the absence of our discontented friend. It was so delicious, indeed, to be without him, that Elle said she felt as if a necklace of millstones had been taken from round her neck. But then, as a matter of expediency, his defection was undeniably inconvenient. Could he, however, be in any way replaced? Not, of course, by another courier, that kind of article being quite unknown in these primitive valleys, but by some reliable man, as, for instance, Santos Siorpas, who had been specially recommended to us beforehand, and who was reputed to be the best head guide in Cortina? To send for him and offer him an engagement for the whole journey was the first step to be taken. He came, a bright-eyed, black-haired mountaineer about 40, a mighty chamois hunter, an ex-soldier in the Austrian army, and now a custode of forests and local inspector of roads, an active, eager fellow, brown as a berry, with honesty written in his face, and an open, vivacious manner that won our liking at first sight. Unfortunately, however, this jewel of a guide was pledged for the next 6 or 8 weeks, and could not by any means get free. Had he no friend, we asked, whom he could recommend to take his place? He pondered the question and looked doubtful. There was old Lacedelli, he said, but he was too old, and there was young Lacedelli, but he was too young. Also there was a certain Angelo, but he was away, and would not be back for a month. Then again, most of the men about Cortina were good enough at rough climbing, but not used to travelling with ladies. Well, he would think it over, and let the signoras know. But when would he let us know? This evening? He shook his head. This evening he was engaged to start for some distant valley with a party of gentlemen who were to ascend a mountain tomorrow. No, he could not promise to see us again before Sunday, but he would then wait upon us after High Mass. This was all we could obtain from him. It was not much, and we began to have dismal forebodings of the failure of our plans. Meanwhile, however, it was of no use to despond. There was plenty to be done at Cortina, whatever happened. We could go to Pieve di Cadore, to Auronzo, to Landro, by good carriage roads. We could see about the side saddles. We could even go in what our landlord called a carretta as far as Falzarego, the hospice on the summit of the Tre Sassi Pass, and thence obtain a view of the Marmolata. During the present uncertainty, it was some comfort first of all to agitate this question of the side saddles. In the event of our being able to carry out the journey, they were of more real importance than a whole army of couriers. Without them, certainly, we could do nothing in the way of peaks or passes. Now we knew, from previous information, that Madame Pezzi, landlady of the inn at Caprile, had a saddle which was, in fact, brought out from England and presented to her for her own use by F.F.T. A persuasive note, couched in the writer's best Italian, was therefore sent over by a special messenger, who had instructions to bring the precious object back, if possible, upon his shoulders. Then old Gadina also possessed one, but divining perhaps that we should be overlong borrowers, he was particularly reluctant to show it. It was not till the writer succeeded in following him one day into the stable that this mysterious treasure was allowed to see the light. It proved to be a fairly good saddle, but then it was only one, and even if we obtained Madame Pezzi's, we should still require a third. "I am expecting a new Sella di Donna from Vienna," sputtered the old landlord, in his polyglot patois. "Ein Schonersattel." "When will it arrive?" I asked eagerly. "Diavolo! I don't know. Perhaps tonight, perhaps next week. I have been expecting it every day for the last 3 months." I relapsed into hopelessness. The old man grinned from ear to ear. He had a large, brown, flat face that looked as if it had been sat upon, and patted me on the shoulder with a paw like a Bengal tiger's. "Tut, tut," he said. "You are a brava signora. You shall not be disappointed. We'll dress up a basta for the cameriera, and all shall be well." This promise of the basta was obscure but comforting. I had not the slightest idea of what a basta was, and Gadina could only tell me what it was not. It was not a side saddle. It was not a chair. It was not a railed seat with a footrest like a child's donkey saddle. It had to be made when required, and should be forthcoming when wanted. Beyond this point we could not get, and there the matter had to rest, at all events for the present. Section 8.